Perfect.
Well, welcome everyone to NetCapital's live Q&A with TrippBio. We have with us today Phil, their CEO. Looking forward to diving in and asking a bunch of questions and really learning about TrippBio, what you guys do, how you operate, and the investment opportunity. As I'm sure many of you know, TrippBio is currently raising capital on NetCapital. Anyone can invest regardless of their accredited status. I will be posting in the chat here shortly a link to TrippBio's offering page on NetCapital. You can find a bunch of great information on the company there. And if anyone has additional questions, either who's watching live or anyone who's watching this via recording, if you have additional questions for TrippBio, you can post a question on their discussion board and they'll get right back to you with answering. Throughout this event today, I've got some prepared questions. I'm going to chat with Phil here and we're going to dig into TrippBio. Like I mentioned earlier, if anyone here on the call has any questions about TrippBio, about the investment opportunity, anything that comes up during our discussion, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom. Ask your question and we'll try and get to it as quickly as we can. And of course, we saved some time at the end of this to just focus on participant questions. So please feel free to pay attention, and if anything comes up, please feel free to throw your question in the question and answer function down here. So with that, Phil Young, appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's been great working with you and the team at NetCapital.
Yeah, we've enjoyed working with you as well, and excited to dig in. So for anyone who might not be familiar, and just to kick us off, do you want us to give us a brief overview of kind of what TrippBio is and what do you guys do?
Sure. TrippBio is a biopharm company that's dedicated to creating solutions for treating infectious diseases, focusing on rogue viruses. And the best example of rogue viruses you can get is the one we're all very much aware of on a daily basis now, the SARS-2 COVID-19 virus. So TrippBio came into being with a wonderful license with the University of Georgia and Dr. Ralph Tripp. All of his research is what is the foundation of TrippBio and gives us the confidence in his data that we moved forward with the license with the University of Georgia very quickly, building on his in vitro and in vivo data and culminating with what we announced yesterday, the results of our first human trial of our drug. And the key thing with Tripp that we're doing that's so different than the other companies that are most familiar to everyone who's seen the press releases lately is we believe that there's a great opportunity to use drugs that have been already approved by the FDA. We call this repurposing drugs. So for instance, the drug we're repurposing has a decades-long safety history. And one of the key components, if not the most important component next to efficacy for getting drugs approved by the FDA, it's that you have to show safety. And safety is of utmost importance. We can shortcut the path to market approval because we can build on and use the history of the safety of this drug for many decades. The FDA has the safety database. They know the safety that's been, that this drug has demonstrated over the decades. So what we have to do is to prove efficacy. So as you saw yesterday, we're working on proving efficacy in treating and eliminating the virus in patients with COVID-19.
It's incredibly exciting, and there's a bunch of different aspects of this that I'm really looking forward to diving into. Sure. Before we get to the product itself and the kind of the company, can you talk to me a little bit about the team? So tell me about who's the team you've built around you. What are their expertises? What do you think makes you all unique and prepared for success?
Well, we're unique because we're really the first of a kind. There's a great organization up in Jacksonville called Spin Out Campus, the brainchild of Billy Meadow. And his idea was that there's a lot of technology coming out of universities principally that never really sees the light of day. There's been a lot of incubators all over the country. Those of us in biotech have been involved with incubators, know how they work, how they operate. But what is different about Spin Up Campus is that they've built a team of experts from the science side, from the patent side, from the marketing side, from the IT side, human resources, you name it. And so TrippBio is the first spin out, the Spin Up Campus. And what I'm able to do now is in the early stages. And remember, TrippBio has only been in business for a few months, and we've made tremendous progress, is I'm able to leverage on the expertise of the team from Spin Up Campus.
Appreciate everyone's patience. I'm sure this is something we've become all too familiar with, and I think it's something that you guys are trying to help us get out of.
That lockdown, you're exactly right. It's our goal to create a treatment, and specifically we're focusing on mild to moderate cases of COVID. So we want to treat the patients early, give them the best opportunity to recover, and keep them out of the hospital.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so that's really exciting. Hopefully we can do these in person going forward here soon. So now that we're a little back on track, I think we started to lose you as you were talking about the team. You had talked about Spin Up Campus and your kind of access to a great group of people. Why don't we kind of pick back up there? So anything else you want to know about the team?
Well, we've got seasoned professionals on every level. As I've mentioned, the patent attorneys and the patent agents, the finance, the regulatory, manufacturing. A key component of what we're doing here is manufacturing, and we've got access to and the guidance from one of the best manufacturing minds I've met in my 30+ years. So we've got a great team assembled, and the evidence of the efficacy of the team is how quickly we've gone from concept to filing our first documentation with the FDA, our pre-IND package.
That's great. And so again, before we dive into the solution itself, let's talk about the problem you're trying to solve, both with kind of Spin Up and the concept, but also the specific drug you're working with, TD213, and kind of what that's designed for.
Well, the whole idea is to create treatments for very problematic infections. We're focusing initially on viral infections, but we certainly have in our sights to go after bacterial infections as well. And so the problem is, historically, for incubator companies and spinning technology out of universities and other places, is that fact that it's very difficult to get a critical mass of people around you to do what you need to do early on before you've been able to raise enough money to do it. And so the Spin Up Campus idea is perfect. We have access to the best people. We have access to great minds in all the areas of importance here for a biotech company. And we leverage that into developing a product. Our first product, TD213, is a very unique mode of action as an antiviral. We're going after the SARS-CoV-19 virus, and we've shown efficacy in every step of the way, from in vitro, in vivo experiments to now the first human experiments using this to treat COVID infections.
And I made a classic mistake of not unmuting myself. So as you think about the kind of regulatory environment, what's the difference between reusing, can you talk to me a little bit about kind of, it sounds like you guys are reusing drugs that already exist and repurposing them for different use cases. How does that change the timeline, the approvals process, things like that?
Well, in general, it rapidly accelerates your timelines from an NCE, new chemical entity. You're shaving many years off of your timelines in that environment. But in this environment, where this is such a dynamic situation and the need is so great, our timelines could be very, very short. We could have approval early next year if things march forward as the way we want. And that's because, as I've mentioned, the safety data is not in question. We know this product is safe, and we know it's been safely used in millions of people over the last decades. So we have that covered. Our responsibility is to prove its efficacy in doing what we say it does. And we have every confidence that it works because of the work Dr. Tripp did early on, and now the work Dr. Ram Gopal just completed in this proof of concept study. So every step of the way, we're looking to ensure that we're accurately presenting the product, and we're accurately presenting the data generated by the product.
Great. And so can you talk to me a little bit about how for those who are kind of uninitiated, this drug that you're working with, kind of how do you know it's safe? What is it, and how did you kind of discover the different use cases for it?
Sure. This all started back several years ago when Dr. Tripp was doing some mass screening of all kinds of compounds, and compounds are the building blocks of the drugs that are available today. And then he went to screening actual drugs, looking for activity in one specific area of cellular transmission of viruses and how viruses replicate. So we know that this works because Dr. Tripp proved that it attaches to a specific receptor called the OAT3, which every virus needs to get into the cell so it can replicate. If you block that, the virus dies because it can't replicate. It uses the cell's own metabolism, if you will, to replicate, and then it'll make new generations of viruses, and they keep going out and doing that over and over and over again. So we know that it works. We knew that it worked based on his lab experiments and based on his animal experiments. And so as we moved forward here, we know that it worked in the proof of concept investor initiated study. Our next step is to go into a larger, what's called a phase 2B study. And we've got those plans already in place, and we'll be getting concurrence and speaking with the FDA on it.
Yeah, and I know you just made an announcement about that previous study. And so we've got a first investor question. I think it ties in well here. Can you tell us a little bit more about that study? What were the results? And then, how many human subjects have you administered? In how many human subjects have you administered the drug?
Sure. Well, as we go back over the decades, this product has been available for its original indication. Millions of people have taken it. In this study that Dr. Ram Gopal initiated, we treated 10 COVID-19 patients, newly diagnosed patients. So there was a very strict protocol where patients had to come in, be tested. Their test had to come up positive, and then they had to meet some other requirements. But then they were dosed with the drug. And so we dosed them and followed them very closely over the course of treatment. So the drug it's an oral drug, which I'll get into in a minute, but it's a very important and positive differentiating factor for us for TD213 compared to the other drugs that have been in the media lately. But we would dose the patients daily, twice a day for 14 days. The patients would come back on treatment day 4, 9, and 14. And so they're study day 5, 10, and 15. But what we did was we saw eradication of virus as early as day 5. And we saw 90% of the patients, 9 out of 10 patients, had no virus by day 14. And if you compare that with, as we highlighted in the press release, a paper that came out just a few weeks ago where they did a meta-analysis of 77 studies. In those 77 studies, the mean time to clearance, so the mean is not where we were, the mean time to clearance was 17 days. And so if, knowing math, we're already well above that, well ahead of that. And we haven't even optimized our dosing yet. And so the next study will optimize the dosing. And I believe, and I think we believe strongly, that we'll see even better and more rapid viral clearance.
Interesting. And so even am I hearing it correctly that off of that study of studies versus your test case, you're clearing the virus about 2 days quicker, or three days
well,
quicker?
It's technically it'll be many days faster, our viral clearance versus the clearance of those studies. But it's just was a time point we wanted to use to show that, and it's important for the FDA to know as well, that this is our first exposure of COVID patients, and we were able to dramatically reduce their time to viral disappearance. And the faster you get rid of the virus, the faster the patients can recover, and the less chance the patients have of going down the cytokine storm cascade. And that's what really causes the problems with the patients. So we want to treat them, get rid of the virus as rapidly as possible, and keep the patients out of the hospital. That's where the mortality increases, and that's where all that bad side effects come into play. And we want to keep the patients away from that.
So yeah, on the note of keeping patients out of the hospital, do you envision this treatment being over the counter, prescription? How might it be administered when it comes to market?
Well, this definitely will be a prescription product, which will need a doctor's signature to go. And the patients will need that to get the product because they'll need to test positive for COVID-19 initially. We do have plans to turn it into a prophylaxis so that we can prevent people from even having the virus begin to replicate in their bodies. But first things first is we're going to prove the efficacy as a therapeutic. So it'll be a prescription product. Right now, we're dosing it twice a day, and we're recommending a 14-day dosing cycle for this product. Doctors will prescribe it, patients will take it, and we'll know it's working because they'll come in with a positive COVID test. And when their COVID test turns negative very rapidly, we hope, the patients will be free and clear of the virus and potentially all the other issues going downstream from having a bad viral infection.
That's great. And just so all attendees know, I've included a link to the press release in the chat on Zoom. There's also a link to the press release in the updates tab on TrippBio's Net Capital page. So also, Phil, you alluded to this being an oral drug and that making it very different than some other drugs we've been hearing about in the market recently. So can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. The great thing about this product is we know how to manufacture it, and we know how to manufacture. That's the other thing you're supposed to do is shut your phone off. We know how to manufacture it, and we know how to make millions of doses a week. So realistically, we can get this approved by the FDA either through the filing of the application or through an emergency use authorization at some point. And we can make millions of doses to support and to treat many millions of patients all around the globe. The products that you're reading about nowadays, the remdesivir and the antibody products, they have very high manufacturing hurdles. They're difficult to make, and they need to be cold chain stored. So they have to be stored at very, very low temperatures. That makes the shipment very difficult. That makes the storage difficult. It makes the treatment difficult. And they can only make a few 100,000 doses by the end of this year. One of the products is boasting they'll get to 300,000 doses. Well, that's great. But if you look at the numbers, there are millions of patients who can benefit from treatment. And that's why I think an oral therapy like our product early on is going to be the best option for patients.
Yeah, that seems like an exciting opportunity. A couple of more questions from the audience. So one simply asked, what is the drug?
TD213. We're not discussing the actual chemical moiety at this stage. We have our patents filed, and we've got every confidence that things are going to work out fine. The FDA knows what our drug is, but we'll keep it that way to protect the investors, to make sure that we have the ability to move the product forward. It'll become known in time.
And that sounds like it's protecting investors as well, to make sure that you keep your intellectual property close to the vest. Exactly. And then we have another question from the audience. This person seems like they know more about the science than maybe I do, but let's see if you understand the question better than me. So, since ACE2 receptor is the primary site that SARS-CoV-2 uses to enter the cell, how does OAT-2 play a role? They're different. There are different ways of transmission of virus to get into the cell. The OAT3 pathway or OAT entryway door, if you will, into the cell is one that the viruses, all viruses, not just this one, have a high affinity to as far as entering into the cell. I know there's work being discussed about the ACE2 receptor. We certainly know about it, but we think we have a better solution by going after the OAT3 receptor. And there is some early science indicating that maybe our product also may have an interaction with that other receptor. But right now we're focused on the OAT3 and the activities that brings forward as far as getting our product into the cell, or blocking the virus from getting into the cell. Awesome. Well, thanks, Corey, for the very detailed question. Hopefully that answered it. So as we look kind of beyond at the coming kind of weeks and months and beyond, what does the market look like for your product? How big is it? What's the potential here? Sure, it's massive. If you look in the United States alone, there've been almost coming up on 12 million people tested positive with COVID-19. That's not including the people who were mildly symptomatic and never went and got tested.
You expand that number globally, and it's hundreds of millions. I think it's 204 million globally that have tested positive. Once again, that number is not even, I don't believe, close to the total number of infections. So the market is probably one of the largest pharmaceutical markets that has ever been, which is a phenomenal opportunity for us. Given our, as I mentioned earlier, our ability to manufacture large quantities at a relatively low cost, I think we can bring a product to the market that is going to be affordable and efficacious, not just in the US, but throughout the rest of the world. And that's one of the missions we have, is to make sure that we can get this to everybody who needs it.
And looking at the long term, do you believe either this drug or the intellectual property of TrippBio produced in a different drug or is through some other avenue has uses beyond simply COVID-19?
Yes, definitely. We believe, we sometimes refer to this TD213 as a universal antiviral, meaning it's almost agnostic to what the virus is, because its activity is the same every time. It blocks the virus from getting into the cell. There's a lot of data and other viral infections showing that this drug works just as well there. And I think for us, we're taking the focus on the pandemic first, but as we move forward and as we develop and generate more data, there'll certainly be other viruses that we'll be attacking with this product, to expand the market, to build the company value, and also to increase our intellectual property protection.
That's great. And another question from the audience. So, what happens to the products and the market potential if effective vaccines become available?
It's a good question. There's been a lot of buzz about the vaccines, and rightfully so. It's the fastest a vaccine has ever come into fruition. But vaccines are fraught with problems. First off, people have to take them, and there's no guarantee that everyone, or even what portion of the people, are going to take the vaccines, number one. Number two, availability of the vaccines, from everything you're seeing, is going to be limited at best, at least for the next 12 months. Vaccines are going to mostly require multiple injections, weeks apart, leaving people partially covered, partially exposed. We don't know the reality of that. And there's always going to be room for a therapeutic, because even though they're touting some early, very high efficacy data, we'll see over time that as viruses mutate, vaccines become much and much less effective. And I'm sure you're going to see that with COVID-19, excuse me, and as it moves forward. And vaccines are not going to be easy, just like those other products. The vaccines require a very strict control process of cold transportation, cold storage, and distribution out to the pharmacies. That's why I've heard that they've enlisted the Army and other people to try to help with that. So I think the market's plenty big for all of us. If you look at the flu market, people have been getting flu shots for decades, and yet Tamiflu does $1 billion a year. So there's a lot of opportunity for revenue for everybody, and for a lot of us to take care of patients.
That makes a lot of sense. And so another audience question is, if the drug's already on the market, how does TrippBio make money? Can a doctor prescribe the drug that already exists in the market versus the TrippBio version?
In theory, they might. History shows us, though, that the physicians are very, very much more likely to, in fact, almost always going to prescribe the FDA-approved product. Our dosing is going to be different than what's on the market today. Our intellectual property and our FDA exclusivity gives us the right to sell the drug just for what we have indicated, that's what we've studied it for, and the FDA has given us the indication for. So in theory, somebody could do it. They could take what's available and kind of mishmash it around and try to take it. But doctors are much more comfortable prescribing for patients what they know has been studied and what's been proven effective and approved by the FDA.
That makes sense. And then, circling back on that question and also kind of digging in on the investment opportunity, what is the business model for TrippBio? So how is the company going to generate revenue, make money?
Well, first off, the business model is to become a leader in developing treatments and therapeutics for viral and bacterial infections, initially starting with bacteria. The business model is to grow, is to expand, and manufacture and sell our products. We will definitely partner if those opportunities are presented and they're good for the shareholders. We'll definitely do that. And the reality is, if we show great efficacy with this product and we have some other coming up in the pipeline, it'd be a good M&A opportunity. And there's a lot of companies out there that would love to have an opportunity for $1 billion plus drug. And so you have that. But the business model, first and foremost, is to focus on getting the capital we need to develop the drug, to get it approved, and then we will then market it or market it through a partner. But at any point along the way, the M&A opportunity could be a great decision for the company and shareholders.
And on the manufacturing side, is the plan to manufacture in-house? Do you contract out the manufacturing to someone who maybe already creates the drug and you just put different packaging on? How does that work?
Yeah, we are actually in discussions with several manufacturing partners, and we'll select somebody. The good news is it's a small molecule. It's easy to make. It's not an expensive process or a time-consuming process. So there are many manufacturing partners that we could go to right now to manufacture it. That's the most cost-efficient way to do it. We certainly don't want to build bricks and mortar just for this when other people have done it for years.
That makes a lot of sense. And so talk to me a little bit about just kind of zooming back out for a second. Yeah, I know you guys have been moving quickly. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what's been the progress so far in the company up to now, and then looking ahead, kind of what are the next major milestones that you guys are looking to hit?
Sure. Well, the company started last spring with the agreement with the University of Georgia for the intellectual property discovered and developed by Dr. Ralph Tripp. That was completed, and then Dr. Tripp finished his experiments in animal models, which in the hamster, he was able to show very, very rapid and thorough viral depletion in animals infected with the SARS-CoV-19 virus. He was able to show that in multiple laboratory experiments. So packaging those two together and knowing that that gave us a high likelihood and probability of success in the human, Dr. Ram Gopal at Midway Clinic heard about it, wanted to study it, and we were more than happy to work with him to facilitate that. He's a well-known, internationally recognized investigator. He's done a lot of work with a lot of different major pharma biotech companies in viral infections, and was very excited to have the opportunity to work with us and test out TD213 in his patient population. That study started after a few weeks of investigational review board. I guess it started back in early October, late September, and rapidly we got to where we received our first data set just a few days ago, and that data was what was in the press release. So it's been a very rapid evolution of an idea to a product, and to a product that's shown efficacy in every step of the way. And that can't be undervalued, because it's an amazing accomplishment to happen so quickly. I've been involved with companies where we've developed new chemical entities, and it takes 3 years just to get into the clinic. And we took 3 months to get into the clinic. And that's the benefit of having the great safety database associated with repurposing a product. So moving forward, we'll be talking with the FDA here in the next week or two, maybe 3 weeks, depending upon their timelines. And we'll be gathering the information from them and their concurrence that we do what's called a phase 2B study. The phase 2B study will be conducted in the United States and maybe some foreign sites, where we'll look at a couple hundred subjects, couple hundred patients at different doses, so we can knock down and finalize the dose we're going to give and move forward with as the commercial product. It's very traditional to do that type of study after your initial proof of concept study. But we believe, and the drug, that the efficacy we're going to show, we believe, and certainly in the phase 2B study, will be very supportive of our opportunity to go and approach the FDA about an early approval, or at least an early use authorization.
And then looking a little bit farther down the line, kind of what comes after TD213?
We have the opportunity to look at several other pathogen applications of TD213. So it's great for COVID-19, we believe, and we've shown so far, but there's other other culprits and other rogue viruses and or bacteria that it may be working on. We're testing those hypotheses now. Some work is being done on that. So we'll be able to build out a fuller platform of follow-on products so that once we go through getting this done and taken care of for the pandemic, we'll have other things lined up to move into.
Great. And we've got one more investor question right now. We still have a few minutes. So of course, anyone else who's watching live and wants to ask a question, please put those in now so we can make sure we can get to all of them. Before I get to the participant question, can you just talk to us a little bit about your current patent position? Kind of what's the intellectual property look like within the company?
Well, we've got a patent position surrounding the work done at the University of Georgia by Dr. Tripp. I don't want to go into it because the patents haven't issued or published, but we feel we have a very strong position, which we're supplementing on a real-time basis. So we started with a nice platform of patent, and we've already been able to expand it. We have patent coverage pending in the United States as well as in the European Union. And we've applied through a accelerated COVID-19 patent program that the government announced, I guess, last spring. It feels like longer ago, but it was just in the spring. And so we anticipate action on our patents very soon, certainly within the next few months, as opposed to how normal patent prosecution progresses, taking many years. So I think everything's come together at a very good time for us, and we've got a very good patent package together. So once that publishes, we'll be able to talk more freely about it.
And that actually brings up a good point, both in the patent process, but also the clinical process. Given the kind of state of, for lack of a better term, state of emergency we're in with COVID-19, that's unofficial term, but how has the regulatory environment changed, and is that, have you been able to use that to your benefit to move along quicker, or would this be quick, kind of regardless, just because of you're using drugs that have a history, et cetera?
Well, I think that we certainly will be at a greater advantage given the fact that we're in the COVID-19 space and that we have something that's safe, and it appears at this stage, and we believe it will continue to be very effective. The FDA has been very willing to help companies that want to develop products for this. They've been willing to help via protocol design, taking management, as well as providing funding for it. So I think all of that's on the table for us from the government side, but also from our side through your site, raising capital as well as an important piece. But certainly COVID-19 emergency, and it is an emergency, is a very positive development for us to bring the product to market much more rapidly. And I mentioned something earlier in passing, and I just want to elaborate a little bit. A couple of the antibodies have already been approved by the FDA after just a very little bit of data in a phase 2 study. And remember, these are NCEs, new chemical entities. These haven't been used before. And that's through an emergency use authorization. As we go forward and produce data associated with our product that continues to demonstrate its efficacy in decreasing viral infectivity rates in patients, we certainly will ask the FDA for the same treatment. We have a product that's safe for decades. We've now showed it's efficacious in a critical environment of COVID-19. And I would have every confidence that the FDA would look at that favorably. But we can't, we don't know the answer till we do the work.
Yeah, you can't predict the future, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of questions coming in, so I'm going to work through them one at a time.
Sure.
One from Jeff. Phil, can you briefly describe your background since you're in a leadership role in the company? How did you end up?
Sure. I ended up here by being introduced to the team at Spin Up Campus, and I was so impressed with the concept and loved the idea of actually having an incubator and a process for doing it with a group of people that have done so many things successfully. So that's how I got here. My history is dating back to the original biotech company. I was one of the first employees at Genentech running a commercial operation. I ran marketing there. Fast forward to starting several companies when I was living in San Francisco. Over the years, I've had exits north of $700 million for the shareholders, raised several $100 million. I've been CEO and had several good exits at 4 public companies. And my sweet spot is building businesses, building technology, raising capital, and either advancing the products through commercialization, which I've done a lot of, and or doing transactions that is accretive to the shareholder.
Fantastic. So in terms of investor potential, how does this compare with the potential of other treatments that are coming to the market? If you can, talk about any of that.
Well, I think it's got probably some of the best potential. The market we're after, if not the best potential, the market we're after is for mild to moderate. So COVID infections that are early. It's an oral treatment that has no special storage guidelines, no special shipping guidelines. It's a very easy product to make. So for us, the sweet spot is anybody who tests positive for COVID in the future, once we gain FDA approval, should be given our product. And it's easy to do. You go to the pharmacy, you pick up your prescription. The other products require IV infusions, they require special setups, timing, and we don't have that. So I think the market potential is huge. If you just look at the numbers, it's certainly tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of patients could benefit. And once we get the therapeutic angle done, we will go after the prophylaxis angle. And that's probably just as big, maybe a bigger market opportunity. Once again, prophylaxis, if somebody knows they've been exposed, may have been exposed, you can take the drug. We know it's safe. And then also being safe, it would give us confidence that we're not going to be causing any problems. And Dr. Tripp has shown in laboratory studies that prophylaxis administration of the product actually proved effective in the lab.
That's great. And then there's a lot of talk about percentage success rates. Does TD213 have a projected success rate? I suspect, we're seeing a lot of those projected success rates from the vaccines in the media right now. Is that comparable?
Yeah, I mean, look, our success rate in the first study was 90% in 14 days. That's pretty good. I anticipate we're going to be much better than that in the next study. I don't know what the numbers will look like, but now that we've learned a lot about dosing and timing of dosing, I think that we'll see a much higher efficacy rate sooner. So 14 days is great, but the goal is to knock it back to 10 days or even sooner if possible.
Great. And a slightly more technical question. So in referenced in the press release, there was a question about what a viral modulator is. Could you explain that?
Yeah, viral modulator, what we're basically saying is that the product has, actually the chemical, and it is a product, has the ability to modulate the virus's activity within the human cell. So it will keep the virus from entering the cell, therefore modulating its ability to, or blocking its ability to replicate. So it's as I mentioned earlier, we kind of call it a universal antiviral because that's basically what it is. It stops all the viruses we've tested from entering the cell via that pathway. And so this just moderates or modulates its ability to be active in a human.
Great. Well, if you're still watching and have any other pressing questions, please put them in now. Kind of last call for questions before we start getting to the end here. So if anyone has any other questions, please write them down. In the meantime, Phil, I know we've alluded to this kind of throughout this talk, but can you talk to investors here, without being too speculative, kind of what are the potential exit opportunities for TrippBio? If I'm an investor thinking about this, what might I see?
Well, what you might see and what we believe we will see is an increasing stock price. The value of the company went up significantly yesterday when we identified and acknowledged and put out the press release showing that we've proven efficacy in human beings, very good efficacy. So you should see the valuation of the company go up just from that. But as far as moving the company forward, there are multiple opportunities for exits. There's always going public. Taking an IPO approach to NASDAQ or NYSE is certainly a great way for shareholder value to be increased and for shareholders to be able to recognize their value and take some investment off the table. As I mentioned, there's no shortage of major pharma/biotech companies that are looking for products, that are looking for high value products and products that are differentiated. And we have a differentiated high value product. that I think most anybody would love to have in their arsenal and to be able to take on. And we certainly would welcome that opportunity should it occur. But the goal straight out of from where we are now moving forward is to develop the product to generate the best high quality data we can so that all those opportunities will come to us because we've proven that we've got a treatment for COVID.
That's really exciting. And so, a reminder to everyone watching both live and via recording, TrippBio is currently raising capital. Anyone can invest on netcapital.com/company/TrippBio. There is a link to their page in the chat function here. And if you're watching this via recording, there'll be a link to their page in the description. You can also ask additional questions on that page if anything else comes up and there's any unanswered questions at this point. Phil, as we start to wrap up here, any final thoughts, anything else people should, investors should know, anything you want to share?
Sure. I think that we have an opportunity here to do something that is unprecedented. And I think the unprecedented piece of this is the speed with which we're moving to bring a treatment to a world that needs a treatment for COVID-19. We certainly would love to end the endless fear and lockdowns. And if we can continue our progress and develop TD213 for the treatment and eventually prevention of COVID-19, we've done a great thing for the world. And I think it'll understandably be a great thing for the shareholders. So if the folks out there haven't invested, please come Net Capital, take a look. And I think you'll see a great opportunity.
Well, Phil, we appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, for answering all of our questions, for letting us kind of dig a little deeper on TrippBio. It's been really illuminating. I hope everyone who attended enjoyed, has learned a lot. And again, there's always more information and the ability to invest on TrippBio's Net Capital page. So with that, I think this is a great time to wrap up. Phil, really appreciate you being with us today.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate the opportunity, and I thank everyone who tuned in, and please reach out if you have any questions. There's multiple ways to get hold of us. Thanks a lot.
Great. I appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.